Listen to this episode if you want the inside scoop on our big announcement today. You may have already realized some takeaways that we've had for the year, some things changing here on the small business growth, and you will actually leave today understanding how to make better business decisions in your business, because I'm going to bring you through how I made the decision for my major announcement today. Hello. How are you? I know that this is the first episode of 2026. We have a lot of things changing around here. This episode is going to teach you how to make decisions in your business, some essential ways to operate and think as a business owner, and what I have learned podcasting for almost 6 years with over 400 episodes, as well as teaching over, coaching over 500 business owners, working within 70 plus industries. So we are going to dive into takeaways, to an announcement, to some changes happening, as well as some, of course, you will leave with tangible strategies of how to make better decisions in your business, what that looks like, and some inside scoop from me who have seen the behind the scenes of a bunch of them. Happy 2026. I am so glad that you guys are all here. I hope you had a rejuvenating holiday season. I know that week in between Christmas and New Year's is kind of lovely for business owners because you get to actually kind of detach a little bit, even the week after Christmas, I guess, nobody can ship in time for Christmas anymore. So you actually just get to take a step back, take a deep breath. And I really hope that you took some time to rejuvenate over the holiday season. I know I did. And, you should take that time as you are a business owner. You get to decide how much you want to push, how much you want to pull. And it's okay to take a week or take a couple of days at the very least to enjoy the holiday season after a really busy Q4. I really hope that you do this. So first things first, let's just put it out there. You may see something that are a little different around here. Our podcast has been officially renamed. This podcast, don't fret, it is now the Business Growth Podcast as opposed to the Small Business Growth Podcast. I know, this might seem like a really small change to you, but it has a big impact, a big message behind the why, and it's going to teach you something about your business and what this really means for you. You guys know that I am an absolute data hog. I am looking at data all day long. It's how I make every decision. It's how I really know where to go in my business. But you also know that I'm scrappy. How I got to where I am is because I am scrappy. I move quick and I make quick decisions. And especially 2019, 2020, Maddie, she was scrappy, right? She wanted this thing to work. She was in that hustle zone and I was scrappy. But you also know, just like everyone, and yourself included, have evolved and developed over their time that they've had their business. This is over 6 years that my business has been in the works. This podcast will be 6 years in March, which is crazy. So what I really want to go into today is, why is this change so big? What does it actually mean to you? And what can it actually teach you about your messaging, about your marketing, and about your branding? You will see some fun new stuff around here. We are officially in a new studio. I have slight changes that are still working on my studio, but we're pretty much done. I'm so happy with how it turned out. It feels much more elevated. You also will see we have new cover art, so we are rebranding the podcast as well, and you will see that there is a new name. We removed the small, and we're going to get into why. When I say my podcast has been the absolute best thing that I have ever done for my business, I absolutely mean it. It has truly changed my life, and I know it's changed a lot of your lives. It is something that feels so deeply intentional and connection driven. And I have so much fun knowing that I put these out there. You guys are listening and we get to chat about it in the community, in the podcast community. We get to chat there, on my Instagram, whatever that looks like. So I first want to look back as to when I started this podcast, March of 2020, pre-COVID. I've probably submitted my application in January. And just to let you know, I graduated college with my second business degree in December of 2020. So I was fresh out of college. I started this business in my senior year college dorm. There was currently, at this day and age, there was under 10% of the podcasts that are out there today. So many people in the last 6 years have started podcasts. And this was 415 episodes ago, nearly 6 years ago. I was a fresh business owner in this online space of creating kind of this online community. Other than my blog, that was really, and I had my family's business. I had owned a business before. I had run businesses, but this was my first kind of consulting, strictly kind of teaching gig that we were doing. And I was really just trying to make it happen. I was saying, okay, what do I do really well? I know that if people can hear me talk, and I kept saying this, if people can hear me talk, they want to work with me. I know that if I can sit in front of people, I can get a message across in a very good way. When somebody asks me, what is something that I feel like I can do better than the average person, is I feel like I can be real with you and I can share information and get it across really well. So when I sat down and I said, okay, what do I think I can do really well? I feel like I can relate to people. I can be human. I can be relatable. And I really am just one of you. I'm just the same as who you are. And I really just want to sit across face to face and have these conversations. I also feel like I can explain things really easily. I also feel like I'm a yapper that can talk all day long. When I put all of those things together, I said, man, that makes sense to have a podcast, because that means that I can sit and I can chat. People can listen to it. They can be very tapped into me. I was an avid podcast listener at this point. I had like a 20-minute walk, probably at least, my senior year in college to school every day. And I would listen to podcasts there and back when I was walking to the campus, whatever. And I was an avid podcast listener when I graduated college. I had just started my business. Again, I was very strappy. And when I was at this point, I was also still doing social media marketing for many of the brands within my local hometown. So if you don't know my story, I started a blog in college my freshman year and it blew up. I started selling a bunch of products. Locally, a lot of business owners were kind of like, hey, would you run our marketing? We see yours working really well. I started running their social media. And then as they all knew that I was about to graduate and move away with my college degrees and I was getting out of the college town, they basically said, hey, could you just teach us what you were doing? So at this point, I was doing a lot of social media coaching. I was doing a lot of business coaching, but mostly social media, as well as I was doing social media management. So I was working with small business owners. When I sat down to create my podcast, it was in January. Again, this was pre-COVID. So the world is very different in the podcasting realm. Everybody started a podcast during COVID, many people at least. And so I basically submitted all the stuff. I created this little cover art. It isn't even what it was now, but it was pretty funny. And I just said, we'll see what happens. When I was doing research, it said that it was going to take 6 months for it to get approved-ish to be on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, because, they have to go through this queue and they basically have to approve it with my trailer. And so I submitted this probably, end of February, maybe. And I put it out there and I said, we'll see what comes of it in the next couple of months. I'll probably be a little bit more structured by then, but I know that this is something that I wanted to do. Lo and behold, 3 days later, from submitting this, I got an email that said, your podcast has been approved. You are officially a podcast owner. And so all this to say, I basically became a podcast host overnight when I was expecting for it to be like a 6-month process. I started this podcast very scrappy, as many people do when it comes to starting a business. I started this business very scrappy. I was working with small business owners. Since then, I've now worked with 500 business owners, accumulated 350,000 downloads, learned a lot about business, worked with business owners who are making on the upwards of $50 million, and have recorded so much on this podcast. I have elevated it to so much. It was time for a change. And it's not just the removal of the small. We will get into that and why that really matters. It is not just the elevation of the branding or the studio. It is really elevating the whole thing. And why this is so important is because I want to talk about why I made this change, my major takeaways, how I made this decision, and what's going to change on the podcast, if anything, and what that really means for you. If this is your favorite podcast, don't fret. We're not going anywhere. We will be here, but things might look a little bit different. And I want to talk about that. And I want to talk about, everybody always asks, Maddie, how do I know what to prioritize? Maddie, how do I know what to do? How do I know what decisions to make? I'm going to talk about how I made this decision today. I first want to say one of the best decisions I've made in my business, as I've already said, was the podcast. My second best decision that I made in my business was my podcast name. You can assume from my podcast name, it is not very sexy. When I tell people in public and they say, Maddie, what's your podcast name? Oh my gosh, you have a podcast. What is it? And I'm like, it's a business growth podcast, a small business growth podcast. It's not sexy. It's not the Call Her Daddy. It's not anything creative. It is very incredibly clear. But when I sat down, this is pre-AI, I was doing all of my own SEO research. I'm doing all of these things. I basically sat down and I said, what do I search when I try to find my podcast? When I try to find a new podcast, what am I searching? And I search, the business growth podcast, or I search product business or small business podcast. I am searching those things and I want mine to be there. My goal is to have mine front and center. So what do? I pick the most SEO, most clear topic possible. And what people tell me all of the time is that they ask their Alexa, hey, can you play me a small business podcast? Play me a business growth podcast. All of these different podcast names that you can ask Alexa, you can ask your Google, whatever that is, or you just type in on Spotify or on Apple that you are looking for. My podcast is one of the first to pop up because of my name. And so I have held on to my small business growth podcast for a very long time, even though it felt like I outgrew it. It felt like I was ready for a change, but it was the best decision I ever made. So why would I change it? And so I'm going to talk about why that is. And I understand this might feel like, what I'm envisioning? I'm envisioning that Devil Wears Prada scene where they have two belts that literally look the exact same. And they're like, oh, but they're just so different. That's how I sound right now. And I'm well aware of that. I know that you are like, Maddie, you literally dropped one word and rebranded the thing. And it's really not that big of a deal. But it is a big deal, and I want to talk about it because it's not just the name. So first things first, why this change and some major takeaways. When I started, I wasn't ready to be a podcaster, but it's been the best decision of my business. Truly 95% of my clients that are not referrals listen to my podcast. They listen to hours of my podcast, and then they decide that they want, hey, Maddie, I have a couple more questions. Hey, Maddie, can you just look at the inside of my business? Maddie, I want your brain in my business. And so truly, I don't know where my business would be. I would have had to identify different sales channels if I didn't have my podcast. My podcast is where the majority of my people find me, and I'm fine if you never work with me. I also just love to build this community. It's what has brought many people to me. It has been my major kind of top of funnel and nurture point for a very long time. I always say, I want to help you turn your small business into a brand. This is really where I started to trip up. I started with a lot of starting business owners, and over the years, I've really began to work with bigger businesses. I work with businesses all the time that are making, $500,000, $1 million, $5 million, $10 million, $50 million in their product-based business. And I kept on saying, this is turning your small business into a brand. And when I would talk to my clients, I would ask them, what do you resonate with? And none of them would call themselves a small business owner in their head. And if you do, there's no problem with that. And you are still welcome here if you do. But many of them would start to say, Maddie, I don't really, I don't think of myself as a small business owner. They would say, I'm a founder, I'm a brand owner, I'm a startup founder, whatever that is. And so I started to identify that even, people that actually wanted to work with me weren't resonating with the messaging that I was using. This is a major marketing, impact here. This is a major marketing takeaway. Also, when I would say small business, I was actively trying to tell you, I'm going to make your small business not a small business and turn it into a brand. So I started to be like, why do I have the small business growth podcast? I mean, it makes sense, but it's not attracting the right audience. And these people, when you have this perception of being small, you stay small. And I work with people that want to go mass market. I work with people that want to make $1 million. I work with people that want to make $100 million. I work with people that want to be an industry leader. They don't have this perception of small. And I don't want you to have this perception of small. I want to be the person that says, you think you're only a small business, but yet you have the capacity and the ability to make this thing really, really big. And I felt like by consistently saying, in your small business, I was just basically overemphasizing the fact that you could say small. And many people believe that success is impossible for them, and thinking small is out of my vocabulary. It has been for a very long time. I have never thought small things about my business. I have always been incredibly ambitious. I have very big goals, and my clients also have very big goals. They're very ambitious. They're relentless with where they want to go. They are not thinking small. And again, there's no right or wrong here. If you are like, Maddie, I'm honestly thinking small, even better, because I want to be the person that tells you you're thinking small is what's holding you back. That person can do it. You can do it. What do you mean that no one else has been successful in your family? What do you mean, you don't think success is possible for you? It's possible for you. I see it all the time. I have clients all the time. They're like, Maddie, I don't think success is possible for me. And I'm like, what do you mean? all these other people, I can absolutely see that this is possible for you with the right actions. So this was a data-driven decision in many ways. The data was market research. It was, doing keyword research with the audience that I really want to have. I would say, hey, what do you call yourself? Do you call yourself a business owner, a small business owner, a founder, a CEO, whatever that is? I see people often out there where they're talking to CEOs, or there are CEOs out there, and they're talking to people like me that have a business, have some team members, you're running your business. I don't call myself a CEO. I call myself a business owner. I'm a founder for sure. CEO hasn't yet connected. I feel like CEO, you need at least 15 employees. Like, I feel like I need multiple employees, right? I don't feel like that's the case. And so, if somebody talks about CEO, it doesn't resonate with me. Similar to you, if you are using messaging in your business that does not connect to your ideal customer, it doesn't have to be the title that they call themselves. But if you are constantly using moms and moms and moms, but yet dads don't get to resonate with that at that point. Or if you're saying, you're this type of person, you're this type of person, this type of person, this other type of person isn't resonating with that. And so we have to basically look at this data, understand what our audience is doing, and truly those small messaging shifts make the biggest difference in calling in your perfect audience member customers. Same thing goes for your brand. So I want you to think right now in your business, where might you not be actually setting that scene? When people say, hey, Maddie, how do I call in my audience? I'm like, you literally call them in by saying, we speak to people who are this way. I work with people who are this way, even people that have already listened to this podcast. I've been saying I work with ambitious people. I work with people that want to go mass market. I work with people that really want to be successful in a very big light. They want to make, 6, 7, multiple 7 figures. People that don't have that goal, again, there's no problem if that's not your goal. Many business owners are like, I'd be okay making an extra $3,000 a month. Just bringing some in for my family. That's awesome, but that's enough. It's not that I don't work with you, but I primarily work with people that want to go mass market. And so even that messaging shift of me reinforcing that, I work with these people. Same for you. We created this product for these people. Are you somebody that loves all of these other things? You'll probably also like our product. When you do that, you're making messaging shifts for people to say, hey, this is for me. And I felt like Small Business Growth Podcast, I don't use small business. I don't really work with small businesses. If you think of small business right now, what do you think of? You think of maybe, people in their basement doing this, doing that, which is fine. And again, if that's where you're at, that's awesome. Many of my clients are. It's just also many of my clients are bigger than that and have teams and other things at this point, and I want to speak with more people. If it's okay, I'm going to interrupt this podcast for 30 quick seconds to let you know about the Founders Cafe. It is my completely free podcast community where you can gain access to bonus resources, gain access to me and free coaching calls, as well as build a network of other business owners just like yourself. Business ownership is a lonely game, and we might as well build community, build a network, and have a space to collaborate. We can bring this conversation and all the other conversations we have on this podcast over into this free podcast community and make this a two-way street. I would love to answer your questions there, connect with you, see you on our next free coaching call. Click the link in the show notes and you'll find the link there. I've also feel like to a degree, again, like I said, I've almost kind of outgrown the small business side of things. 6 years ago, that was who I was working with. I was working with a lot of local people. And that's another thing. Small business is often thought of as a local brick and mortar, restaurants even. And that's just not really the guise of what I work under. And so honestly, over the years, I've grown. My business makes more money. I've been able to invest in production, experience, and legitimizing my podcast. I have people editing my podcast. I have built out a studio. We market them. The studio looks much better than it did when I was in my bus. And so I feel like the podcast itself needed a rebrand to match everything else, to match the elevation that my brand, my personal brand has had, my podcast has had. And truly, some of these changes might continue to roll out over the next couple of months. You might see a couple little other things. I think we're pretty much there, but everything else has elevated except I felt like my podcast. When I started my podcast, it was literally me and my parents upstairs because it was in the middle of COVID and I had just graduated college, my parents' bonus room above the garage. And I just had a podcast. There was no video at that point. I could have put it on YouTube, but video podcasts were barely even a thing. There was 10% of the podcasts out there. And I was just riffing. I was just talking about business. I literally didn't even create outlines of a podcast until maybe 2 years ago. And I was really just riffing. And then once I built that, I was traveling. I was in my bus. For all of you guys that have been here since the bus days, you could hear birds chirping and like cows mooing and cars driving by in the background. And I was editing my podcast myself, honestly, up until like a year or so ago. And I was barely marketing it because the SEO was all that people needed to find my podcast. And I was scrappy for a very long time. And I think anybody that tells you have to be ready for any of these things, like to actually start taking these actions, is doing you a disservice. I think that's a major takeaway here is your scrappiness can be very good as long as you have some strategy behind it. But the scrappiness leads to just doing things before you were ready. I say this a lot. It's like, you're never going to be ready for some of these things. I don't know if I would have ever been ready for a podcast. I have no idea. When people tell me they find my podcast and they go back to my oldest one, I'm like, oh gosh, what did I say? What did I sound like? Like, I know I've gotten way more comfortable on camera. I know that I've gotten, way more confident in everything that I'm teaching over the 6 years, as anybody does. And I know that if you go back right now and listen to the oldest to the newest, you're gonna be like, okay, wow, things have evolved, things have adapted, things have gotten better. And so this branding change can also make such a difference of the person that I'm calling in, because it actually evens out to who I'm speaking to at this point and the brand that I have as well. So again, a big takeaway for you is that your branding, as it elevates, where else do we need to elevate things? As well as you elevate, you're going to call in a different type of audience. Like, you're going to also elevate who you're speaking to. People that come here now have a different expectation, especially as the industry of podcasting has changed. Again, there's 10 times the amount of podcasts that are out there now than there was 6 years ago when I started. And so we have to basically adapt with the times. Again, a major takeaway for you, even if you don't want to change, you don't feel like you want to adapt, we have to adapt with the times and what the consumers want. I didn't really want to do a video podcast, but literally when I look at my data, 60% of you listen or watch a video when you're on Spotify. You watch me speak. And I do that. When I'm washing dishes, I put a podcast up and I plop it up on Spotify and I'm watching the video, because why not? It's more fun. We get to chat and it actually feels like we're speaking face to face. So I had to elevate and turn into a video. So I did that in the bus. Those videos are crazy. And then, as I continued to go, now I was in a house, we were kind of in like this in-between house. I have been in how many? Literally like 7 different homes since I've started my podcast. When I tell you I traveled, full-time travel, we really did. We might stay in a spot for 3 to 6 months, but we were moving. And now that we're settled, we're in a new space, we're going to stay here for a few years, it was time for me to elevate everything. So as my business and my listener base grew, I found 2 major types of business owners. And again, there's no right or wrong here, but there is the businesses versus the brand owners. And this is where I was always trying to differentiate when I say I'm turning your small business into a brand, is I wanted brand owners. I want people, like the people that I work with are people that, again, make it big. They want to disrupt their industry. They want to really see this thing come to life, and they don't just want to make a couple extra $100 or $1,000 here and there. There's 2 different types of people. There's no right or wrong. If you are like a side hustler, I commend you and I love you. There's nothing wrong with that. Those just aren't the people that I create a ton of content for. And it is like, yes, the marketing strategies and that, but I also speak far further than that. I talk about team. I talk about distribution. I talk about wholesale. I talk about things that are mass market, right? And so those people will not resonate with it. It really is just solving bigger problems. It's talking about different objectives, different outcomes, different topics that we want to talk about. That was kind of the small business realm, as I felt like I was kind of stuck in this content, sales, website, things like that. Not to say we won't talk about those things, because it's still needed, but we basically just needed a change and a refresh and a realignment in many ways, whether it be messaging, branding, the problems we solve, the topics we talk about. I really want to elevate this, and I really haven't taken much change overall as to how I operate the podcast, other than, getting it produced and elevating different things, basically just offboarding. But this is our big brand, elevation. And what I want you to take away from this is I started scrappy. It was the best decision I've ever made. And now I'm able to look back and say, now I can elevate this, and I think it needed a change. My major note here is that you have to be able to pivot. You can never be too married to an outcome in business that is actually against what your long-term vision is, just because it's what you've always done. That is one of the biggest takeaways here. I have a lot of people coming in, well, Maddie, I've always just handmade it. That's okay, but that doesn't mean that where you're trying to go, that can actually be strategic. This may not seem like a big change for you, but it's a big change for me, whether it's how I feel about the podcast, how people will perceive it when they're trying to be a guest on my podcast, as well as the things we're going to talk about, the really elevation that we have around here. Again, we have two belts and we're saying, it's just so different. I realize dropping one word is not this like catastrophic, holy cow, this is wild. We have the same level of SEO, which is really important to me for people to be able to find it. It's where the majority of people find it. Again, data, I can see how new listeners find my podcast is almost all off of search, which is great, or being shared. Now that I look at this, I can look back and I can say, Maddie, you are 6 years deep into business. You've worked with 500 plus business owners intimately. We've had, 40,000 unique people at the very least watch the podcast. I have had 350,000 downloads. I work with brands that are some of your favorite brands on stores nationwide. I just chose that this needed to be a time that we elevate our brand. And I want that to be a major point for you that like you get to choose to do these things. If you are feeling resistance around something because you feel like you've outgrown it. I had a client this last week just announced that she's rebranding because she felt like she outgrew the name brand that she had and like the visuals that she had. That's fine. Sometimes you do. And there's reasons that these other big brands are doing these things is because they also outgrow them as well. So I know that I've been saying things might change. You might not even notice a change other than everything looks a little prettier, right? We are done thinking small around here though. We aren't talking about small objectives or making your first few hundred or few $1,000s. We really are talking about bringing your product mass market. And how do we make you an industry leader is what I'm going to explain. You may see this shift happen over the last couple of months because my client base has expanded. I've also been integrating more of these episodes of talking about team, talking about distribution, talking about bigger topics, how to make your first $1 million. What does a 7-figure business owner really mean? What are these different stages of business? Maybe not strategically or I look strategy and everything that I'm doing. You might not be doing that, but looking back, you might notice that at this point. Moving forward, you might not notice many things, but you also might. Some things that you may expect are going to be, there's more guest experts speaking on other topics coming in here because I want this to be a space that we are bringing you a variety of not only approaches, but just like complexities. We have a financial specialist. We have somebody that's helping getting funding. We've had branding, we've had bookkeepers. I want some of these specialists to come in, not only to direct you to really incredible people and service providers that are going to do done for you services or provide you services as a business owner, because I know many of you come to me all the time. Hey, Maddie, who do you think should build out my website? Hey, Maddie, how do I get funding? Hey, Maddie, how do I hire my first couple of people? I want to bring you some specialists on those categories. If you ever have anybody that you would love to hear that, please send them on Instagram. Would love to pitch people for you. Or you could, send me a DM, send both of us a DM, put us in a group chat, say, hey, I would love to have you guys on the podcast. I would love to do that. I'm very open. If there's ever a topic that you want, I can go find the expert as well. You're also going to have more founder spotlight series. This was something I did kind of over the years of just like here and there. But what this is it's people sharing their story of growing their business. Something I really want to talk about is I don't just want it to be like the owner of Poppy who just sold for $2 billion and she's been on every podcast ever. Great. I'm sure you can learn so much from her, but I also want to talk to people that are at different stages that were more so sharing the process as opposed to just the achievement, because I actually think it's really important for people to realize that a lot of people are grinding. A lot of people feel the way that they are, and this is what's normal at different stages of business. And so I want to bring on founders that are making 1 million, 10 million, 50 million. It doesn't have to be somebody selling for $2 billion for it to be very helpful for you. So you're going to see some more founder spotlight series. We have some really exciting ones kind of in the works. And you're also going to hear me talk about more high level problem solved, team, finances, operations, websites, distribution, systems, things like that, because that's what's necessary when we're talking mass market. And even if you aren't yet there, it's good for you to get this information normalized to you, getting involved and understanding this messaging, understanding, all the jargon that goes into it, because there's a whole bunch of abbreviations that is good to know as you grow in business. And when you have conversations with other business owners, because we will be talking about it, you will already know so much of this terminology. Of course, I will continue to talk about branding and marketing and sales conversion throughout. Of course, I'm not stopping talking about content and community building, direct to consumer sales. Those things are necessary in business. We might just add some more of these other depths. Again, if I wasn't making this episode and if you don't listen to it, you probably would barely even recognize that this is a major change. Ultimately, At the end of the day, I want to teach you not just based off of this achievement, like you hear on all of these other podcasts, but I want to teach you from the process of becoming an industry leader. How does that even work? What do we really have to do? How do we audit? What are your mindset blocks? How do we really move from there? What does it look like? What does it take? And who do you have to become in order to make that make sense? As always, this podcast will continue to be hyper conversational, sharing real business growth advice and sitting down twice a week to chat like a biz bestie. None of that is changing. You will still see me here. You have me on YouTube, you have me on Spotify, you have me on Apple, you have all of these other things. Again, this might not seem like a big change for you, but it feels like kind of a new era of the podcast for me. You may feel it, you may not, but to us, it means we are collectively reaching bigger, not just me, but also you. We are reaching bigger of saying, this is what we're normalizing. This is what is changing. And I would love to hear what you want more of here. If there's a topic that you feel like you wish that I would cover, if there is anything that you wish that I would do as a community, we would love to have you. I will still have my podcast community. You can click the link in the show notes to join. We have a lot of new things coming there. We're basically going to be utilizing the podcast community, which is just a Slack channel that's completely free for you to join. We notify you of every podcast. We put, exclusive resources out there. We're going to be adding a lot of resources within the Slack channel in 2026. We're going to start, on any of our like meatier frameworky episodes, you might get some PDFs, you might get some worksheets in there, as well as we do a monthly live coaching call. You also might see some exclusive podcast episodes in there this next year where we're really getting into the nitty gritty with guests, where we'll ask them some rapid fire questions. We'll also allow the podcast community to basically submit their questions that they want me to ask these guests, and then I will ask them their questions as well, and then we will put that segment in the podcast community. So we're going to put that link in the show notes below. Again, that is the Business Cafe. I really want it to be a space because not everybody has a space to have business conversations. And when I was first starting out and I didn't have colleagues and a team, I didn't have many friends that were starting businesses, I needed an outlet to talk about my big goals and my ambitions and my business. And I really wanted a community like what I am building. And so that is why I have created this. I want you to have this podcast community where you can talk to other business owners. You can bounce ideas off of them. If you're struggling with something you put in there, you also can get, of course, some exclusive information from me, some bonus monthly coaching calls. You can get, one-on-one support from me inside of there. And then we can go from there as well. Again, this might feel like not a big change for you, but welcome to the Business Growth Podcast. I'm your host, Madison Page, and I am so excited to be here. I truly love this podcast. It is so much fun. And when people ask me what was the best decision I made, it was this. I hear from you guys all the time in the DMs that you are binging my podcast. Your kids love my voice, which is so funny. Someone messaged me a couple of weeks ago and said that their kids will only sleep in the car if I'm speaking, which is so incredibly sweet, that they have some babies that like I'm literally lulling them to sleep, which is hysterical because I'm just talking my little buns off over here and you guys just love it. And that's awesome. Thank you for providing me this outlet to like get my thoughts and my yapper energy around business out there. I always say like I'm a terrible road trip companion because all I want to do is critique the billboards that we see. My husband loves it. And this is that energy for sure, as I can sit down and just, rant about things or bring you some frameworks, bring you strategies, talk about the businesses that I think are going really well. You will also see more case study episodes because honestly, the two that I did one on Apple and I did one on another brand. I forget what it was this past year, the past couple of months. And you guys, they were my most listened to episodes almost all year. And they just came out a couple of months ago. And so you guys clearly loved those. There's a lot of things here. So if you don't follow me on Instagram at This Is Madison Page, pop in there and let me know what you would love to see from the podcast. We have a lot of kind of different things happening on social this year. We are opening enrollment for support going into January as well. I know many of you guys are like new year, new me, finally reaching my business goals this year. If you're looking back, you're like, shoot, I know, January is one of my busiest months. So we are in my DMs there as well. If you want any support, just DM me support. We can hop on a quick little call and we can chat. But I'm so happy to have you here. And I would love to hear what you would love to hear about the podcast. I would love to hear what guests you would like, what topics you would like. And I would love to have you in the podcast podcast community. Thank you so much for being here. When I say I love you, I'm rooting for you, and I'm in your corner always, I do truly, absolutely mean that. I'm in this world to be of service to you and to grow your business. And because it is a gift that I know that I have, it is a knowledge base that I know that I have that I want to share. And I have such a love for it. And I do truly love showing up here twice a week. And yeah. So with all of that to say, I do love you. I am rooting for you, and I will be in your corner always. I will see you in the next episode. I hope that this at least gave you how to make better decisions, how to look at your data, and how to really understand that it is okay. I give you full permission to outgrow what you're currently doing and to make a couple of changes. So here's the Business Growth Podcast. Bear with me, as I'm sure I will say the Small Business Growth Podcast every once in a while. But have a great day. I'll chat with you soon. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Business Growth Podcast. We put out new episodes every Tuesday and Friday. So if you love this one, make sure that you're subscribed so you never miss a conversation. If you want more conversations with me and other business owners, make sure that you join our completely free podcast community, the Founders Cafe. The link is in the show notes. You can get bonus resources, access to free coaching calls, as well as connect with like-minded business owners like yourself. Make sure that you rate and review the podcast 5 stars, share it with a friend to keep those conversations moving, and come back every Tuesday and Friday. I'll see you there.